Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this workshop. This is Advocacy 101, Truth Telling and Testimony. We're going to go around and do a round of introductions with the presenters today. My name is Rita Chang. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator over at IFCLA. I'm going to pass it to Sarah John, who's our tech wizard, also the ED of IFCLA.
Hi, everyone. I haven't quite figured out which button of mine I'm supposed to spotlight, so I'll figure that out in a second. My name is Sarah John. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of IFCLA, the Interfaith Committee on Latin America. Alicia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Hernandez. My gender pronouns are she, her. I am the St. Louis organizer at Missouri Jobs with Justice.
And my name is Richard Von Glahn. I use the he, him pronouns. I am the policy director at Missouri Jobs with Justice.
Awesome. I think that's everyone. Like Sarah said, if you are someone who speaks English, you would take care to select the English interpretation button. If you're someone who prefers to listen and speak in Spanish, again, pick the Spanish button. Alrighty. Purpose of today's workshop. So we have 3 things that we hope to accomplish today. To improve your awareness on how laws are made at the state level in Missouri and how you can make an impact on this process, specifically through the use of testimony. Secondly, we are hoping to provide you some information and the space to practice crafting effective testimony, not only to take action on the legislative process, but also for that personal transformation that comes along with telling your story. And then finally, we hope you walk away feeling excited about getting involved at the state level. Next slide, thank you. So for this workshop, we're going to operate with a set of 4 community agreements or norms. Number 1, we're all teachers and listeners. We're practicing inquiry and respecting lived experience. Number 2, we hope to, thank you. We're all agreeing to listen deeply and to participate actively, minimize distractions. 3, be mindful of body, spirit, and emotions. And then finally 4, share responsibility for accessibility. So we're going to speak slowly and without jargon and use names and pronouns. Are these all right with folks? Are we ready to jump in? Can I get some nonverbal, some action in the chat? All righty. Thank you. All righty. Okay. So we're going to talk about our agenda very briefly. This is a workshop, so that means that there will be some time to practice the skills that you'll be learning about today. So first, Sarah is going to lead us in some grounding to help us feel prepared to discuss the subject matter at hand. Then our friends at Missouri Jobs with Justice are going to talk about how laws are made at the state level and how the community influences this process. This workshop is specifically about testimony, so we will take time to specifically focus on what that is and the process of delivering it at the state level. We're going to talk about how to structure your testimony and how to tell an effective story. And then finally, we're going to have some time to practice preparing and delivering testimony in pairs. And then we'll be ending our workshop with a live evaluation. Okay, with that, I'll pass it to Sarah for some grounding.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Rita, if you are able to add me to the spotlight, that would be great. Otherwise, no worries. I just literally couldn't figure it out. So to start today, thank you. To start today, I prepared something that is an adaptation of a poem or prayer that many of us might know, or some of us may have heard of, from a Jesuit by the name of, I'm just going to call him Pierre because I don't speak French, and I will probably mispronounce it. But the prayer is called Patient Trust. But so today we'll call this version Impatient Justice. So I'm going to ask Alicia and Rita to help me read line by line. So if you wouldn't mind taking a deep breath, and we will just center yourself in this space. Above all, trust in the slow work of justice.
The colonizer virus teaches us to feel impatient in everything, to reach the end without delay. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new.
And yet the wisdom of our ancestors, of generations and revolutionaries before us, teaches us that justice is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time.
Don't try to force the changes of justice as though you could do today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances, acting on your own goodwill, will make of you and our world tomorrow.
Give the Creator the benefit of believing that her hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete.
I will share the version in Spanish after this session today. So I wanted to pause because something that speaks to me about this slightly modified version is that this takes time. And I don't want it to take time. And I am always impatient that change takes so long. But when I think about giving testimony and showing up, especially in some of the context of our state, it takes a little bit of humility to recognize that when I go and speak my part, I'm not going to show up and have someone sitting next to me be like, oh, if only I had known that, those awesome words that Sarah said, then I would change my worldview. Then I would vote differently or pass laws differently. I have to let that go. It's going to take more than me. It's going to take more than one time. And every time I go, I think about what I can put and build so that the next person that goes builds on top of it, and that I build on top of that. And together we will create that change. So I want to pause for a minute and open any space for reflection. I think we just have about a minute or two. If you'd like to come off mute and share any feelings, you're welcome to do so.
That resonates, and as somebody who's recently made the career shift from being in schools to now being in advocacy, yes, that resonates, and it's so hard to think in those terms. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
I want patience, but I want it now. That's my view. Beautifully said, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll be sure to share that. So if anyone needs to spend some more time with it, if it's helpful for you, great. If not, take a deep breath and move on, and you don't have to think about it again. I want to make one more claim that if you joined and you haven't yet selected your language of interpretation, you need to do so. Even, and I would say especially if you are bilingual, please click the globe at the bottom of your Zoom. If you need help, message one of the IFCLA staffs, and that'll be me, and I'll be happy to help you select your interpretation.
Okay, I think this is my opportunity to start. And I really appreciated that poem and the picture even right before here, Sarah, on the process of building a house. And it might be because you might hear background noise of construction happening at my house, and it's reminding me to be patient and things take time. And that is absolutely true in the Missouri legislative process. So I am going to give a very basic overview about where legislation comes from and our opportunities to impact how legislation moves at different moments. The first thing that we should all remember is every law ever passed has started as an idea. And I would venture to say an overwhelming majority of those ideas have not been ideas by politicians, but have been ideas by community members who are experiencing issues and problems and have solutions. We are the most critical people in passing laws, because often the idea for laws comes from us and comes from our community. And we should not forget our role in this process or diminish our role in this process simply because we don't have a title as a state representative or a state senator. But once ideas are thought of and communicated, we often have our members and activists meet with legislators to explain issues. What members of the Missouri legislature can then do is take an idea and turn it into a bill, to actually write language that would say, this is how this idea can interact with state law and become state law. At that point, your idea often becomes a bill with a name or a title, often House Bill 100 or Senate Bill 25. And it will often be referred to as such. Once you have a bill, your bill will be referred to a committee. A committee is a smaller group of elected officials than an overall chamber. In the Missouri legislature and in all of our government, we often have what is called an upper and lower chamber, a House and a Senate. Bills can start in either chamber, but in each case, there is a bill will be referred to a smaller group of individuals that make up a committee with a particular focus on a different area of expertise. There are committees such as agriculture, there are committees such as elections, there are committees related to workforce development, but each tries to be focused in a different area of law. These committees are where the bill is often presented by the sponsor and where the people with the idea behind the bill can come and testify and use their stories to explain why the bill is important. Committees are often where bills can be amended, that is, they can be changed, or that there can be questions asked about them. And the first step for a bill to move forward is it needs to receive a majority vote of the members of the committee. Once that is done, it will move to the full chamber from which it originated, either the House or the Senate. In Missouri, the House has 163 members, the Senate has 34. There, it will once again be debated. It can be changed, but this is not a process in which the public gets to readily participate. It is a process in which legislators debate one another about the bill. At this time, it is effective for the community to continue to lobby, but we will have to lobby individual legislators either by traveling to Jefferson City or meeting with them in our communities, and we will have to ask them to be our voice when the bill is being debated. We as community members do not get to actively participate at this moment. If our bill gets a majority vote in the chamber that it began in, it then does the same process of going back to a committee, but this time in the other chamber. So most bills will start in the House. If it passes a House committee, it goes to the full House. If it passes the full House, then it goes to the Senate. A majority, I see the question, a majority is a simple majority, 50 plus 1 to move bills forward. So if your bill moves out of one chamber, it will then go to a committee in the second chamber. This is again an opportunity to come and speak and share your stories and share your perspective. If it is voted through that committee, it will then go to the full Senate or House, depending on which is needed, and a full majority will be needed once again. Sometimes in this process, the House might pass a bill that is slightly different from the bill that the Senate passes. If that is the case, then representatives from the House and the Senate will be assigned to what is called a conference committee, where they will try to negotiate the differences between the bill and come to an agreement. If they are able to, then each chamber will cast a final vote to move the bill forward. Once each side, once both the House and the Senate have passed a bill, it goes to the governor. The governor has an opportunity to veto a bill, or to sign a bill, or to allow the bill to become law without taking any action. If the governor vetoes the bill, he must do so by the end of June, and there would then be an opportunity for the House and Senate to override his veto, which requires a 2/3 majority, not a simple majority. And that happens after the legislative session. That happens in September in Missouri. This entire process in Missouri has to happen between the first week of January, when the legislature comes into session, into the time that they are making laws, and the second week of May. Any bill that doesn't make it through the entire process in that timeline would have to start over the subsequent year. And I know as we talk about patience, that can seem frustrating, but that is the way that works. Some ways to really influence the legislative process starts with trying to meet with politicians from your community. This is often where ideas can become bills. This is, I think, one of the most impactful areas, and where personal stories can really have a strong impact. A small number of people meeting with one or two politicians to try to make them passionate about your issue, and to recruit what I would call a champion on an issue. Another place for community input is by testifying in committee. When bills go in front of a committee, it is again a valuable time to tell some of the personal stories, but there we also begin to talk about some of the details of the bills, and not just the problems that we are facing, but the solutions that the bill offers. In this space, we will sometimes face questions, sometimes friendly questions, sometimes unfriendly questions. But that is a space in which we can tell our stories. There is also a time for which we want to demonstrate what I would frankly call power. We want to demonstrate that the community supports a bill. And so usually when this is being debated in the House or the Senate, we will encourage people to write letters to the editor of a newspaper, to send emails, to make phone calls, for groups to travel to Jefferson City together and meet collectively with legislators, to show the collective strength of the community, not just individual stories, but the collective strength of a community behind an issue. Those are really the main tactics in which we use to try to influence the legislative process, to pass a bill, or sometimes to stop a bill. Sometimes bills are bad ideas and we need to stop them from happening. I'm going to turn it over now to Alicia to give some pointers onto how to do some of those things that I mentioned.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so Richard kind of laid the foundation for some of the things I'm going to talk through. So, you know, what is testimony and who is involved? And the most important thing to start off with is that testimony is not only accessible to experts. Everyone can testify. As you see on the screen, you don't need to be a US citizen. Another thing to note is that sometimes hearings are posted with as little as 24 hours notice. But we are all impacted by legislation, and we are all empowered to hold our elected legislators accountable in this process that Richard just laid out. So who are the targets? They're the decision makers, they're the legislators, they're the committee members. And those are the people who are taking action on this bill. So what is their role in this? So as we know, government paves the way for the promotion and protection of our human rights. Government is comprised of people who represent us. It should remove barriers such as discrimination and interference, while also investing in the services and information we need to make decisions. All that sounds great, right? Don't get it twisted. They should not be legislating in the dark. It is our duty to hold them accountable and to share our stories, to share our collective power, as Richard just talked through. So next slide. So Richard mentioned a bit about power. So we have an analysis on power at Missouri Jobs with Justice. It is the ability to control, create, or prevent change. Another important thing to note about power is it is never given, it is taken. It is made up of organized people and organized money. And you heard Richard talk about the collective power, organized people, sharing our collective stories. It's not just on the individual. And so when speaking to legislators, oftentimes legislators are not empathetic, not understanding to immigration related issues. And so one really important strategy is doing your research, learning what you can about this legislator. And what we call that is power mapping. So who is on the committee? Who is going to touch this bill? What do they care about? Who supports them? Who gives them money? What groups, organizations, churches, associations are they part of? Who are their people? You know, who is their base? It is important to find out relationships that influence and most importantly, hold them accountable before you go speak before this legislator to give your testimony. So next slide. So understanding their history on an issue is also important. How have they voted? Kind of going back to who their people are, where they show up, where they go to church. Understanding their self-interest and their values is a really great way to sort of tap into that. Reference that explicitly in your testimony. You know, legislator so-and-so, I see that you stand proudly in this area, you voted this way on this bill, and tying that back to how that aligns with this bill and the issue at hand and your perspective on whether you support or oppose the piece of legislation you're talking about. So yeah, it is important to do your research, find out who it is that you're addressing, who is your target, and start to name those when you are giving testimony. And so with that, I will pass it back to, I believe, Rita.
Thank you, thank you. So we just talked about the Missouri legislative process broadly. Then we talked about ways that the public can influence this process, and more specifically, how you can testify or give testimony. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about why testimony is so important. And I think this is a quote that Sarah shared with me as she was reading a book. If you don't tell your story, someone else will. And it just fit, so we put it in the presentation. And so you can go to the next slide. So why is testimony important? Well, as Edgar Villanueva puts it, if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And your story is your personal, irrefutable truth. You are the expert of your experience. You know firsthand what it's like to live like someone with your race, gender, class, disability, citizenship status, etc. And for people with marginalized identities especially, storytelling allows people to control the telling of their truth, combat stereotypes, as well as give visibility to their own experience. At the same time, your personal experience is connected to much larger systems at play, such as racism, poverty, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy, which in sociology, this connection between the personal and the public is called the sociological imagination. We as individuals interact with these larger systems, and once the problems that people face in their everyday lives become common among members of their community, those problems become a common narrative for this community and on a societal level. So now that we know why it's important to tell your truth or your story, we're going to focus back on how to craft your testimony. How do you deliver testimony? Recall that the audience are the legislators, the committee members hearing the bill. You can deliver your testimony in person or in the form of written testimony. We're not going to go through the logistics of where to click online to find that in this workshop, but instead we're going to take time to focus on crafting the message and then give you some time to practice. So first off, you're going to introduce yourself. Address the committee chairperson and members. Dear honorable members of the committee, and state your name, city, county where you live, and the organization that you represent, if any. This is about credentialing yourself, not only telling your representatives who you are, but also signaling why your testimony is valid. Second, you're going to define your position. Do you support or oppose the bill? Third, you're going to defend your position. So summarize the reasons for your position. This is also where you should include personal stories that describe the impact of the bill on your community. You're explaining why the representative should, why the committee should support or oppose, you are explaining why you support or oppose this bill in order to get the legislators to side with you as well. And then finally, you're going to conclude and restate. restate your position clearly, and thank the committee for their time. So that's the basic format. Introduce and credential yourself, define your position, defend your position, and include personal stories, and conclude and restate. Now, it seems very cut and dry, so we're going to focus on how to craft that personal story in defending your position. And so to do that, we're going to use something called the value, problem, solution, and action format that was developed by the Opportunity Agenda, which I think is a parallel to the race class narrative that is used by the MOVE Collaborative, if anyone has heard of that before. So first, we start off with values. We want to center messages around shared values in order to create an internal conflict and drive action. If your legislators really care about concepts like equality and things like everyone who works should be able to provide for themselves and their family, or something like that, point out ways in which this value that you are presenting does or does not come up in the legislation that you are talking about. Secondly, you're going to talk about, following values, you're going to talk about the problem. What is the problem with the specific bill that you are giving testimony on? You're going to connect your personal story that you have, your personal experience, to this larger systemic issue in that problems affect all of us. Make it clear who are the people in power who can change things, which would be the legislators. And just know that problems are people-made and solutions are also people-made. Okay, and so after you just outline the problem, you're going to talk about solutions. So you want to talk about solutions immediately to create a sense of necessity that the problem has to be addressed, that it's important to be addressed, a sense of responsibility that we as people within our community have a responsibility to act on this, and that there's a sense of control as well, that these problems are not inevitable, they're not out of our control, and we do have the power to change things. We want to show a proactive vision of what we want to see in the community, not just the things that we don't want to see. And then finally, we are going to name specific actions that legislators can take in building this proactive vision that you just named, because change is possible and practical. So again, that personal story is structured using the values, problems, solutions, and actions format. Okay, so this chart is very overwhelming. I'm going to tell you that you do not need to write down everything seriously now. You will get a copy of these slides and the recording after. So just to preface that, we're going to take a deeper dive into how to craft your testimony and how to talk about your message. So first off, we're going to talk about myth busting. Avoid myth busting frameworks and negation, as the myth is what will stay in people's minds. Using terms like by no fault of their own, if we're talking about undocumented students, or rather undocumented people, if we're talking about people with deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. If we say things like they are not illegal immigrants, they are not criminals, we are using this frame of myth busting and reinforcing the language that is used to reinforce stereotypes, usually negative stereotypes about groups that we're trying to advocate for. Okay, And then you want to use plain language, break down facts and statistics into manageable pieces of information, such as stories. So it's good to use data to back up your claims. However, you want to make sure that people know what you're talking about. So if you're saying things like TPS, DACA, things like that, you want to make sure that your legislators know exactly what you're talking about. And then in addition, if you just have statistics, as in 97 people believe that cheese is a well-balanced breakfast, you want to give some context and you want to give interpretation to the data that you're providing. Okay, and then after that, we want to also consider metaphors. So something that has been common that people might use is the term level playing field. And this metaphor evokes this idea of equality. We want a level playing field for everyone in America. But at the same time, if you think more about level playing field, it's talking about equality, but at the same time, it's talking about competition. And so what we want is we want a vision for everyone to be able to achieve, and we want people to have, these basic necessities to not only survive, but to thrive. So do we really want to emphasize competition over that? Broken immigration system, again, this metaphor evokes crisis and fatalism. So something that we want to do is recall that we want to make sure that people know that change is possible, that we do have the solutions to the problems that are at hand, and that by calling something like the immigration system broken, it's as if there's no solution, or that there's nothing that we can do about it. And that's the opposite of what we're trying to say. Yes, and broken could be framed as outdated, incomplete, things like that. And then finally, we want to talk about impact. So impact, people might say, like, you could talk about impact by saying how many people were impacted in this fire, or how many people lost their homes. But you could also talk about, why does this problem that you're bringing up affect everyone? Why is this an issue about shared humanity? What will change if this problem is resolved? Not only for this community, but for our community entirely in our state. And just thinking about a lot of immigration policies that prevent access to basic services for immigrants. What does this mean about our values as American people? So again, you want to really tune into that internal dialogue. And if you do share these values, then why is it that we see these disparities happening? Why do we see discrimination happening? And so we are going to talk a little bit about delivering your testimony. We just talked about why testimony is important, ways that you can structure your message. And now we're going to talk about what it's like delivering testimony in person. I'm wondering, could anyone raise their hand or give me a nonverbal? Have you ever given testimony at the Missouri legislature? I see a few hands, yeah. Would someone care to share what that was like?
Hi, I'm Michelle Gralnick, and it just so happens that last week I was invited with 24-hour notice to go to Jefferson City to speak in support of House Bill 2221, which references essential caregivers in skilled nursing facilities. And I was not at all nervous and was very excited about the opportunity. what I was not prepared for was the fact that an 11 a.m. hearing with the subcommittee would not start until 11:30, that there would be 6 bills on the docket, with ours being the last one, that many of the preceding bills had similar language, which the representatives wanted to then use as a reason for combining all of our bills rather than appreciating the distinctions, that disproportionate time would be given by the subcommittee chairperson to certain bills, so that when it finally came down 3 hours later to hearing our bill, the decision was made to combine it with the one preceding. And then we were all told that in the interest of time, we only had 1 minute to speak. And I actually ended up speaking for 12 minutes and 27 seconds without getting cut off, which I feel very happy about. However, the next person to testify did get cut off because the subcommittee had to recess in order to hear Governor Parsons' State of the State address. And I honestly have no idea how long they recessed, when and whether they reconvened. I did not get to hear any of the opposing testimony, which was already very interesting to me because I had never heard lobbyists and how they speak against a bill. So when I was testifying, after having sat through 3 hours of listening to the opposition's, the paid opposition's comments, I found myself abandoning some of what I had thought I would be saying, and instead finding that I felt compelled to dispute some of what they had been saying. So in all, I feel that I was successful, but I definitely did find myself impacted by all of the delays, as well as the pressure that was then put on people testifying because of the inequity in time available. And then
Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
No, thank you so much. So that is one example of what it's like. And Sarah, if you could put up the slide deck, there's some specific things that we could also touch on that comes along with testifying at the state level. So navigating that anxiety and emotional response that your body is having. So it's just really difficult to do public speaking, super nerve-wracking. There's a lot of anxiety in that, just speaking out loud about something that you're passionate about, as you just heard. And then specifically with immigration issues, you can even add in witnessing hostility, lies, and sarcasm. You literally have to sit next to the person who filed the bill, and that's really nerve-wracking. And Missouri legislators tend to be less sympathetic to immigration issues, if you ask me. And it's really hard to hear people saying lies, giving sarcasm and hostility about legislation. We're talking about people. We're not disagreeing about pizza or what color you like. We're talking about people. And then finally, what's really important about giving testimony is just practicing reflection. So that just happened. You just went up, you said your piece. How do we make sense of that? Who is your community who can support you? And what can we learn from adversity, especially when you're talking about immigration issues, instead of falling into apathy and despair, which is definitely challenging, if you ask me. And on top of that, we just wanted to add, sometimes there will be media outside of the hearing who will want to talk to you. And just knowing that you just poured your heart into saying your piece, will you be prepared to talk to media? How will you navigate that situation? These are some examples of what it could be like giving testimony specifically for immigration issues in Missouri. So we said a lot of things. We're going to have some time to practice, like we said in the beginning. Sarah, can I pass it off to you?
Yes, absolutely. I would love to tell you all about a really incredible fake piece of legislation that has fakely been introduced by, in fact, a real senator in the state of Missouri. We're going to call this Senate Bill 7000, which was introduced by Senator Bob Onder from District 2. Anyone in District 2 in the House? Let's hear that. See the hands. Bob Onder, your friend and mine, has titled his bill, Keep Missouri Minty. This piece of legislation actually resembles some of the tuition equity conversations we've been having about access to higher education in Missouri. However, Senator Onder has decided that mint chocolate chip ice cream is really only a privilege and a right and something that Missouri residents should have access to. So he's created a law to say that at the point of sale, anywhere that you go in the state of Missouri, if you want to buy mint chocolate chip ice cream, you have to show that you are a resident of Missouri. I'll save us the black hole of what it means on existing state regulations of what it takes to prove that you're a Missouri resident. But I'd love to get on a soapbox about that. The law also says that if you're an out-of-state resident and you can prove that you're a resident in another state, then you'll have to pay an additional $3 tax per scoop of that delightful mint chocolate chip ice cream. However, if you are unable to prove that you are a resident of any state of the United States or are considered an international resident or foreign born, side note, should we ask Senator Onder about Puerto Rico? I'd like to have that conversation. But if you can't prove that to the point of sale person's liking, then you are not allowed to purchase it. And if you purchase or are found in possession of mint chocolate chip ice cream, you are punishable. That is a crime punishable as a Class D felony. So I'm going to pause for a second and make sure we understand this bill. Are there any questions that you might need to understand the implications of Keep Missouri Minty? All right, Rita, let's figure out what we're going to do with this.
Okay, so now that we've heard this very controversial bill, thank you, Sarah, we are going to have some time to practice giving testimony. So right now, we're going to be split up into, yes, this is not a real bill. However, this is a bill that was modeled after some very real legislation. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to enter some breakout rooms. There will be 2 people in a breakout room. And right now, you'll have 5 minutes to prepare your testimony. Do you oppose or support the bill, and why? Give your reasons why, include a personal story, and then conclude and restate as we learned previously on how to give testimony. Each person is going to take 5 minutes to give their testimony to the other person. And so one person is going to be the speaker, one person is going to be the listener. The speaker is going to speak for 5 minutes about their position, give their testimony. The listener will listen. And listeners, by the way, you should communicate with the speaker if you would like to be a compassionate listener, someone who is supportive of the person who is giving testimony's opinion, or you could be a Missouri legislator and act a little bit like maybe there are other priorities that have your attention. So communicate amongst each other to figure out what kind of listener you would like to have. If this is your first time giving testimony, we recommend that compassionate listener. But if you've done this before, if this isn't your first time, we would recommend that you try on the Missouri legislator hat. So each of you is going to take 5 minutes to be the speaker and be the listener. You're going to, one person's going to go, then you're going to switch roles. Then you're going to have 5 minutes to debrief amongst yourselves. What was that experience like? What did you observe? How did you talk about the things? And then we're going to come back and then debrief the experience together. Sarah, did I miss anything?
Sarah's muted.
There we go. Thank you. I figured it out. Sorry about that. I know Paula has a question, and I'm going to come to you in a second, Paula. I want to make sure that folks who are using interpretation, if you just stay in this room, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. If you stay here, I will make sure that you get assigned to a room with an interpreter. So I think the easiest way is once I open rooms, just wait here, and then I'll make sure that we get folks paired with interpreter correctly. Paula, I can't see you anymore, but do you have a question, or has it been answered?
I have heard a lot about Representative Onder or Senator. It might be useful to know just a little bit about him, since that would be some research we do ahead of time.
Alicia or Richard, do you have facts on hand about him? I would just Google search and say maybe not appropriate things.
Senator Onder really, really likes mint chocolate chip ice cream, and he wants to make sure that he can have as much mint chocolate chip ice cream as he ever desires. His favorite ice cream store is located in downtown St. Charles, and is ironically owned, maybe not ironically, but is owned by someone who lives in Illinois. Senator Onder attends a Catholic church in Wentzville, and he volunteers for his son's Boy Scout troop.
That's fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you. So like Rita said, you just popped it in there. Thank you, Rita. We're going to do 5 minutes prep. And then, so each person, once we get into breakout rooms, you can have 5 minutes to prepare your testimony. Then you'll have 5 minutes to deliver. The other person will have 5 minutes to deliver, and then 5 minutes to debrief, and we'll come back together to debrief total. Okay, if you are ready, here we go. I will also say that Alicia, Richard, Rita, and I will be popping in and out of the rooms to help with any questions. Talk to you soon. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back. Just as a reminder, you might need to select your interpretation again. So please just go ahead and verify your interpretation selection. Sometimes it gets wonky. Goofy. Wonky is a terrible word to give you. I'm sorry, Alejandra. Hi, folks. Welcome back. Please check that, make sure that your interpretation is still selected. Sometimes that gets messed up. So please take a moment and check that you're on the appropriate interpretation channel. Looks like everyone's coming back in. This is great. If you just came back in, I'm going to say one more time, please make sure that you've selected your interpretation channel, or that it's still selected, because sometimes that gets lost in the breakout rooms. But if you can hear me or hear the interpreters appropriately, let me know. All right, sounds great. Okay, let's do a little debrief. I would love to hear one word or so, couple reactions. I'm going to literally one word. come off mute. Give me a one-word reaction to what the trial practice period felt like. One word.
Challenging.
That was what I was going to say, the same word, but we were in the same room.
Okay, what else?
Sharpening.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I interrupted you.
Sharpening.
It was educational. That's more than one word.
Thank you.
Enlightening.
Motivating.
Fun. Okay. So what I would love to open, if you heard something either in your own testimony or in the person that you were with that was really awesome, like one point where you were like, man, I totally feel this. I'm vibing with what you're saying. What gave you the goosebumps? Go ahead, Paula.
Carly made the argument that children are great purchasers or lovers of ice cream, and they don't usually carry identification. Perfect.
Thank you.
Whoa.
What else? What else, folks? Did anyone else get goosebumps?
Yeah, Sarah, we connected on the fact that I'm Catholic too, and you know, and that there's this tradition within the Catholic Church of fundraising, selling nice things to eat, you know, like bake sales, and ice cream would fit right in with that. And so the state of Missouri and our business could all benefit from, you know, opening up the sales to all comers, you know.
You know, Dan, I'm hearing a religious freedom argument in that angle, right? That they're taking away your right to fundraise for your faith of choice. I like where you're going here. Not bad for 5-minute prep.
I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. My partner took the opposite view of the one that I took. She said she was for the bill. And I thought she brought up some really, really interesting points. And she came at it from the angle of Missouri being unique and how this would keep in that with that. And so I just thought that was really clever.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think one of the affirmative arguments that I'm sure Mr. Onder would be making is about health, right? That we want to specifically to counter Carly's argument, as I maybe understand it, right? That like you wouldn't want children to be able to willy-nilly buy mint chocolate chip ice cream because obesity and sugar and all of these things, right? So I really appreciate the challenge added there. Good work.
I'm curious if anyone mentioned, I was trying to think in describing Senator Onder, you know, his favorite ice cream store, where I assume he gets his mint chocolate chip, is actually owned and operated by someone from Illinois. And so that person would not be able, theoretically under this law, maybe to even have mint chocolate chip ice cream at the store when he comes to get ice cream, because he would be a person maybe outside of the residency requirement. I don't know if he'd even be allowed to have mint chocolate chip ice cream for the own senator to have. I don't know if anyone brought that up.
I've now decided that Zoom needs sound reactions, because I wanted to push a button that was like, ooh, right? When you said that.
Sounds like the person that sells the ice cream would just have to pay an additional $3 per scoop.
Pass it off to the small business owner, eh?
Mm.
It's getting juicy or slushy, frosty.
I don't think, I didn't mention, as a presenter, I didn't mention to the senator that we heard that the owner of the store lived right across the river in Illinois. Instead, we just emphasize the positive aspect of that. If you open it up to sales to all non-residents as well, then people who live right across the border or right across the river can bring their money into Missouri. And if you'll allow them to purchase and consume minty ice cream.
Another thing is that if Missouri would pass the minty ice cream bill, then that would start Illinois, Kansas, Iowa, Tennessee, Kentucky. They'd all have a minty ice cream bill.
Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your creativity and your flexibility. Hopefully there was some humor, mild snark and sarcasm. I appreciate that you stepped into that. I know specifically the last thing I'll say is that sometimes we get really emotional and passionate. By we, I also mean me inclusive, about the issues that we're working on. And that's really important. And sometimes it's helpful to step back from that and take it into a totally different direction so that you can like get that creative juice again, or creative freeze, if you will, this time. Rita, cut me off. I'm doing too much with the metaphors.
No, this is great. I'm just wondering how this sounds on the interpreter's end. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. In the 5 minutes that we have left, we would like to invite you to complete a live evaluation with us. We haven't had this workshop in the past, so this is the first time that we're doing this kind of workshop. We want to know what your experience was like. Did you learn anything? Do you feel excited about mint chocolate ice cream? Perhaps, thank you, Sarah. Perhaps you want to take action. And so there are several opportunities to get involved, not only with IFCLA, but also with Missouri Jobs with Justice. We will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who had registered with some additional resources. So these resources right here, as well as the slides and the presentation recording. So again, please take some time to fill out that live evaluation to help us improve our programming. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to put the link in there one more time in case you got some ice cream on your screen. Here it is. I also know that if you have to go, please do. We will send that that link out by email, and you may have 5 more minutes back to your day. So if that is needed to you, please take it. And thank you all for your hard work today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Helpful
much.
and fun.